In the quiet town of Willowbrook, nestled in the heart of the USA, Halloween night held a special place in the hearts of its residents. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the streets, my friends and I embarked on a Halloween scavenger hunt, a playful deviation from our usual routines. Little did we know that this seemingly innocuous game would lead us down a path of unimaginable terror, unveiling the town's darkest secrets. Equipped with flashlights and an aged map, we embarked on our adventure, deciphering cryptic clues that led us through the dimly lit streets. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves and the promise of excitement, yet beneath our enthusiasm, a sense of unease began to settle. As the night deepened, the clues took on an unsettling tone, guiding us away from familiar routes and toward forgotten corners of the town. Laughter began to wane, replaced by an inexplicable sense of foreboding that crept into our minds. Our journey culminated at an abandoned building on the outskirts of town, its windows shattered and walls marred by the passage of time. The moon cast an eerie glow over the decaying structure, casting long shadows that danced like malevolent spirits in the wind. The air hung heavy with a silence that felt otherworldly, as though the very fabric of reality held its breath. With hesitant steps, we entered the building, our flashlights piercing the inky darkness that enveloped us. The floorboards groaned beneath our feet as we moved further into the unknown, our collective breaths forming ghostly mist in the frigid air. In the center of the room, a worn leather journal lay nestled atop a rotting wooden table. As I opened its brittle pages, a rush of cold air brushed against my skin, raising the hair on my arms. The journal's entries chronicled a series of chilling events that had plagued Willowbrook long ago, a rash of disappearances, unexplainable phenomena, and a pervasive darkness that seemed to seep into every corner of the town. The journal's pages exuded an almost tangible sense of fear and desperation, drawing us into a world of torment and horror that had once consumed the very soul of Willowbrook. Each word was etched with trembling penmanship, revealing the torment of those who had lived through the nightmare. As I read aloud, a chilling wind seemed to sweep through the room, extinguishing our flashlights and plunging us into pitch-black darkness. Panic gripped us as we fumbled for our lights, fingers trembling in the inky void. When the beams of light finally pierced the darkness, we found ourselves not in the same room. Before us lay a twisted version of the room we had entered, frozen in time yet shifting in its eeriness. The walls were adorned with old, faded photographs that captured the town's history in frozen moments, a group of children playing in the street, a joyous wedding celebration, and a somber funeral procession. But the faces in those photos were twisted with fear, their eyes haunted by an anguish that reached beyond the limitations of the image. As we moved among the images, they seemed to come alive, the ghostly figures whispering echoes of the past into our ears. Scenes of tragedy and despair played out before our eyes, the pain and suffering of the town's history laid bare in front of us. With a renewed sense of urgency, we raced for the exit, our heartbeats echoing like drums in our chests. The door was agonizingly close, a mere few steps away, when the room appeared to warp and shift, the walls closing in around us in a nightmarish embrace. Desperation fueled our efforts as we fought to reach the door, our minds racing as we grappled with the unexplainable horror that surrounded us. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the walls receded, and we found ourselves back outside, gasping for breath in the cold night air. We fled from the building, our hearts pounding, our thoughts consumed by the terror we had experienced. Gathered together in the safety of our homes, we formed a pact, promising to keep the events of that night a secret, hoping that the memories would fade with time. But the echoes of the past refused to be silenced, a lingering reminder that Willowbrook held secrets that could not remain hidden forever. And as Halloween night faded into memory, the truth remained, a haunting presence that we could never truly escape. Now before I begin reading the next story, I wish you a very happy Halloween. It'll be a delight if you could support my work by subscribing to the channel and leaving a like on this video. On the outskirts of Ravenswood, a small town in the heart of the USA, our family home stood as a beacon of normalcy, a place of comfort and warmth. But this Halloween, we decided to transform it into a haunted house attraction, a place where laughter would mix with screams, and joy would be tinged with fear. Little did we know that our playful endeavor would awaken something truly sinister, something that would shatter the boundary between the imagined and the real. As dusk settled, casting long shadows that danced ominously across the lawn, we began our transformation. The once familiar rooms became unrecognizable, shrouded in darkness and mystery. Cobwebs adorned every corner, their delicate threads whispering tales of forgotten histories. Candles flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls, while hidden speakers emitted spine-chilling whispers that seemed to originate from the very air itself. As the sun dipped below the horizon, we donned our costumes and gathered by the front door, excitement and anticipation running through our veins. The first visitors arrived, their footsteps echoing on the porch as they waited for the chills that awaited them inside. I welcomed them with a grin, my makeup concealing my true identity. They entered hesitantly, their breaths quickening as the air grew heavy with tension. The path we had prepared led them through a labyrinth of frights, rooms where shadows seemed to move on their own, mirrors that reflected distorted faces, and secret passages that twisted and turned like a macabre puzzle. As the night progressed, the reactions were everything we had hoped for, a chorus of screams, nervous laughter, and wide-eyed wonder. Yet amidst the excitement, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The air grew colder, and the whispered voices seemed to grow louder, their words indecipherable yet hauntingly familiar. In the midst of guiding the next group, I heard it, a soft, deliberate footfall echoing from the corridor. I turned, expecting to see another group of visitors, but there was no one there. The corridor stood empty, the shadows seeming to shift and writhe of their own accord. Brushing off the unease that gnawed at my insides, I led the group forward. Yet the footsteps persisted, growing louder, more insistent. I felt a chill crawl up my spine as I realized that the whispers were no longer confined to the speakers. They surrounded us, their voices a cacophony of hushed murmurs that seemed to seep from the very walls. By the time the final group had finished their tour, my unease had transformed into full-blown dread. I urged my family to leave the haunted house, but they brushed off my concerns as mere nerves. It was all in good fun, after all. As the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were no longer alone in our own home. I heard footsteps on the stairs when no one was there, whispers in the empty rooms, and glimpses of shadows that darted just out of sight. Panic began to claw at my chest as the realization set in, the lines between our creation and reality had blurred beyond recognition. I rallied my family together, the laughter and merriment of the evening replaced by a shared sense of fear. We huddled in the living room, our breaths ragged, our eyes wide with terror. That's when we heard it, a whisper, soft yet unmistakable, right behind us. "Get out." The words hung in the air like a curse, the voice neither male nor female, a chilling amalgamation of countless whispers. With hearts pounding, we fled our own home, leaving the haunted house attraction behind, and with it, the unspeakable presence that had taken it over. As we stood outside, panting and shaking, we realized that our Halloween endeavor had unleashed something beyond our understanding. The house stood silent, its windows dark, its walls a testament to the horrors we had unwittingly conjured. Years have passed, but the memory of that night still lingers, a reminder that some things are better left undisturbed. Our family home sits empty now, its doors closed to visitors, its windows shrouded in darkness. And while we've tried to move on, the echoes of that sinister presence continue to haunt our every step, a chilling reminder of the thin line that separates the world of make-believe from the realm of the unknown. It was Halloween night in the quiet town of Willowbrook, USA, and the air was electric with a mixture of excitement and anticipation. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the streets adorned with pumpkins and cobwebs. My group of friends and I had decided to spend the evening indoors, seeking the thrill of old-fashioned entertainment. Little did we know that the seemingly harmless board game we found in my attic would lead us down a path of terror we could never have imagined. As the hours grew late, and the wind outside howled like a distant banshee, we gathered around the dimly lit room, the flickering candles casting shadows that danced across the walls. The board game, called the Game of Shadows, seemed innocuous enough, its faded box depicting a medieval scene with knights and castles. Without hesitation, we set up the game, each of us taking a turn to roll the dice and move our pieces across the intricately designed board. At first, the game was simple, a roll of the dice, a move of the piece, and a challenge to overcome. But as the night wore on, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. The game seemed to take on a life of its own, as if it held an ancient power that was awakening from its slumber. The rules became more obscure, the challenges more treacherous, and the stakes unbearably high. With each roll of the dice, the shadows in the room seemed to deepen, the candlelight flickering ominously. The challenges on the board became eerily personal, revealing secrets we had never shared with each other. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that the game was tapping into our deepest fears and desires, exploiting our vulnerabilities in the most sinister of ways. As the night progressed, our laughter turned to unease, our camaraderie replaced by suspicion and paranoia. The challenges became increasingly dangerous, demanding acts of bravery that pushed the boundaries of our courage. The air grew heavy with tension, and the room seemed to close in around us, as if the walls were whispering secrets of their own. But the true horror came when we realized that the game was no longer confined to the board. The room around us began to shift and distort, the lines between reality and illusion blurring before our very eyes. Shadows seemed to take on sinister forms, and the air grew suffocatingly cold. In a desperate attempt to end the nightmarish game, we collectively decided to stop playing. But as we reached for the game pieces, a cold wind swept through the room, extinguishing the candles and plunging us into darkness. Panic surged through us as we fumbled for the light switch, only to discover that it had vanished. Trapped in the suffocating darkness, we could hear whispers all around us, the voices indistinct yet filled with malevolence. Panic turned to terror as we realized that the game had come to life, its power extending far beyond the confines of the board. We stumbled through the dark, each step leading us deeper into the abyss. Hours stretched into eternity as we navigated the endless darkness, our voices trembling with fear as we called out to each other, our cries swallowed by the void. It was as if the very fabric of reality had been torn asunder, and we were trapped in a nightmarish realm of shadows and whispers. Just when it seemed all hope was lost, a faint glimmer of light appeared in the distance. We stumbled towards it, our hearts pounding in our chests, desperate to escape the horrors that surrounded us. As we reached the light, we found ourselves back in the dimly lit room, the board game sitting innocently on the table. With trembling hands, we packed up the game, vowing never to speak of that night again. The sun had risen, casting its golden rays over the town, as if banishing the darkness that had plagued us. We left the house, our hearts heavy with the weight of the horrors we had witnessed. To this day, we don't speak of that Halloween night, the night we played the game of shadows. The board game has been locked away in the attic, a reminder of the sinister forces that can be awakened by a simple roll of the dice. And as Halloween approaches once again, I can't help but shiver at the thought of the darkness that lies just beyond the edges of our reality, waiting to consume those who dare to play its deadly game. It was a cold, foggy Halloween night, and as the moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the town, my friends and I set out on our annual trick-or-treat adventure. As we roamed the dimly lit streets, we stumbled upon an old, decrepit building hidden behind a tangle of overgrown trees and vines. The sign above the door read Hargrove's Costume Emporium, but the shop looked as though it hadn't been open in decades. Curiosity got the better of me, and with my friends trailing behind, I pushed open the creaking door. Inside, the air was musty and filled with the scent of dust and decay. Old masks and costumes adorned the shelves, each one looking more ancient than the last. As I explored the dimly lit shop, my fingers brushed against the fabric of an ornate, crimson cloak. It felt strange under my touch, almost as if it had a life of its own. As I pulled it off the rack, I noticed a faded tag attached to it, detailing the costume's history. The tag revealed that the cloak had once belonged to a mysterious figure known as the Blood Countess. Legend had it that she was a malevolent witch who had terrorized the town centuries ago. The cloak was said to be infused with her dark energy, and those who dared to wear it risked being consumed by her malevolence. Shivers ran down my spine as I quickly put the cloak back, wanting nothing to do with its haunted past. But the allure of the shop's hidden treasures was too strong to resist, and I found myself drawn to another costume, a tattered, harlequin outfit. I hesitated before touching it, as if the fabric itself might carry a curse. The tag attached to this costume told a haunting story of a jester who had once entertained the king and queen but had fallen out of favor and met a tragic, gruesome end. It was rumored that the jester's spirit still lingered in the costume, seeking revenge on those who dared to wear it. Feeling a chill in the air, I stepped away from the rack, unnerved by the costume's eerie histories. But there was one more that caught my eye, a porcelain doll costume with faded ribbons and cracked porcelain mask. The tag told a haunting tale of a young girl who had gone missing on Halloween night decades ago. It was said that her spirit had become trapped in the costume, forever seeking her way back home. As I continued to explore the shop, I uncovered more and more unsettling costumes, each with its own chilling tale. There was a werewolf costume rumored to be cursed by a vengeful witch, a grim reaper outfit said to bring death to its wearer, and a ghostly bride gown tied to a tragic love story that had ended in heartbreak and despair. As the night wore on, the shop seemed to grow colder and darker, and the costumes seemed to whisper to me, beckoning me to try them on. But I knew better than to succumb to their malevolent charms. With a shiver, I finally decided it was time to leave the haunted shop. I warned my friends to stay away, but their curiosity got the better of them, and they couldn't resist the lure of the mysterious costumes. That Halloween night turned into a nightmare as my friends donned the cursed outfits. One by one, they fell under the influence of the costumes' dark histories, their personalities changing, and their actions becoming erratic and sinister. Terrified and desperate to break the curse, I sought the help of a local historian who knew the town's haunted past. Together, we discovered that the key to breaking the curse was to return the costumes to their rightful resting places, the graves of their original owners. With determination in our hearts, we set out to undo the haunting, praying that it wasn't too late for my friends. It was a race against time as the night wore on and the malevolent influence of the costumes grew stronger. In the end, we succeeded in breaking the curse, but not without sacrifice. The ordeal had taken its toll on all of us, and we would forever carry the memory of that fateful Halloween night. The haunted costume shop disappeared after that night, leaving behind only a void of darkness. But the chilling tales of its cursed costumes would forever be etched in our minds, a warning to never underestimate the power of the supernatural on Halloween night. On a chilling Halloween night, I found myself wandering through the dense woods, my bucket filled with candy from a successful night of trick-or-treating. As the full moon shone brightly above, casting an eerie glow on the ancient trees, I couldn't resist the temptation to explore deeper into the woods. As I ventured further, I noticed a soft, flickering light emanating from a secluded clearing up ahead. Curiosity got the best of me, and I decided to investigate, thinking it might be another Halloween party or spooky gathering. The closer I got, the more the air around me seemed to change. It felt thick and charged with an inexplicable energy. Goosebumps crept up my arms, and I hesitated for a moment, but my curiosity overpowered my fear, and I pressed on. To my surprise and intrigue, I stumbled upon a group of women dressed in flowing robes, encircling a large cauldron that emitted a mysterious blue flame. Their faces were obscured by the darkness, and they chanted in hushed tones, their voices blending into the night. Feeling like I had stepped into a scene from an old horror movie, I watched in awe as the witches performed their strange rituals. My heart pounded in my chest, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the mesmerizing scene before me. Unbeknownst to me, my presence had not gone unnoticed by the witches. As their chants grew louder and more intense, the atmosphere around me shifted, and I began to feel a tingling sensation, as if the very air was charged with magic. Suddenly, the chanting ceased, and all eyes turned towards me. Fear gripped my heart as I realized I had interrupted something sacred, something beyond my understanding. "You should not have come here, child," a voice echoed through the clearing, sending shivers down my spine. "This is not a place for the living to witness." I stuttered, trying to apologize and explain that I had no idea what I had stumbled upon, but the witch's expressions remained stern and unyielding. "We cannot allow you to leave," another witch spoke, her eyes gleaming with an unsettling intensity. My heart pounded in my chest, and I felt a surge of panic rising within me. I wanted nothing more than to run, but it was as if an invisible force held me in place. One of the witches stepped forward, a look of uncertainty crossing her face. "Wait," she said, her voice softer than the others. "Perhaps we can let her go with a warning. We should not meddle with the balance." The other witches murmured in agreement, and with a wave of their hands, the strange energy around me dissipated. I felt the weight on my chest lift, and I was finally able to move again. "You have seen what you were not meant to see," the first witch said, her voice still stern. "We will not harm you, but you must promise never to speak of this night to anyone." I nodded, too terrified to speak. The witches turned back to their cauldron and resumed their rituals, leaving me to slip away silently, my heart pounding in my ears. As I fled through the woods, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just stepped into a world beyond my comprehension. The encounter with the witches left me with more questions than answers, and I couldn't help but wonder about the secrets they held and the power they wielded. From that night on, Halloween took on a whole new meaning for me. It wasn't just about dressing up and collecting candy, it was a reminder that there was more to the world than met the eye. And as the years went by, I found myself drawn back to the woods on Halloween night, wondering if I would ever encounter the mysterious witches again, or if that night had been a one-time glimpse into a hidden realm of magic and mystery. It was Halloween night, and my group of urban explorer friends and I had decided to take on our most daring adventure yet, exploring the infamous Ashbourne Asylum. The decaying building had been abandoned for decades, rumored to be haunted by the souls of its tragic past. Some said it was cursed, but we were skeptics, dismissing such claims as mere urban legends. Our plan was simple: spend the night inside the derelict asylum and document our experience. Armed with flashlights, cameras, and nerves of steel, we approached the imposing structure as the moon cast an eerie glow upon its crumbling walls. "Are you guys ready for this?" Sarah, the fearless leader of our group, asked with an excited glint in her eyes. The rest of us exchanged nervous glances, but we all nodded, trying to hide our trepidation. Urban exploration was our passion, and we couldn't resist the allure of uncovering the mysteries hidden within the asylum's walls. We ventured through the broken entrance, our footsteps echoing in the empty halls. The air was thick with the scent of decay and dampness, and the dim light from our flashlights created eerie shadows that danced on the cracked walls. As we explored further, strange occurrences began to unsettle us. Objects seemed to move on their own, and faint whispers echoed through the halls, despite there being no one else present. We tried to rationalize these phenomena, blaming our imagination or the creaking of the old building, but the unease lingered. In one of the patient rooms, we found a disturbing collection of old dolls. Their glassy eyes seemed to follow us, and the sight sent shivers down our spines. We quickly moved on, eager to escape the unsettling atmosphere. As we descended into the depths of the asylum, we stumbled upon an old morgue, complete with rusted metal slabs and discarded medical equipment. The cold air seemed to grow colder, and we could hear the faint sounds of footsteps echoing from a distance. "Did you guys hear that?" I asked, my heart pounding. "Probably just rats or the wind," Sarah replied, trying to reassure us. But deep down, we all knew that there was something else in the asylum with us. The feeling of being watched intensified, and we began to question the wisdom of our adventure. Despite our nerves, we pressed on, determined to uncover the secrets of Ashbourne Asylum. We reached the basement, where the walls were covered in cryptic symbols and eerie paintings. They depicted scenes of madness and torment, and the atmosphere grew even more oppressive. "Let's just take a few more pictures and get out of here," Adam suggested, his voice betraying his fear. I nodded in agreement, my hands trembling as I took snapshots of the haunting artwork. But as I reviewed the pictures, I noticed something unsettling. The images on my camera were not the same as what I had seen with my eyes. The paintings appeared different, as if they were changing before my very eyes. "Guys, something's not right here," I whispered, showing them the bizarre photos. Suddenly, a chilling wind swept through the basement, extinguishing our flashlights. We were plunged into darkness, and panic set in. We fumbled for our phones to use as makeshift light sources, but the shadows seemed to grow darker and more suffocating. Then, the sound of laughter echoed from all around us, sinister, mocking laughter that sent chills down our spines. It was a sound that couldn't possibly belong to any living being. Let's get out of here now!" Sarah shouted, her voice trembling with fear. We stumbled through the darkness, blindly searching for the exit. The walls seemed to close in on us, and every step felt like an eternity. Finally, we found the broken entrance and burst outside, gasping for breath in the cool night air. As we stood under the moonlit sky, we looked back at the asylum, its decaying facade looming over us like a dark specter. The experience had shaken us to our core, and we knew that we had encountered something beyond our understanding. In the weeks that followed, we shared our chilling experience with others in the urban exploration community. Some dismissed our story as mere exaggeration, while others believed that we had stumbled upon something malevolent within the asylum. Regardless of what others thought, our Halloween night adventure at Ashbourne Asylum had left an indelible mark on us. It was a night we would never forget, a night that taught us to respect the unknown and to tread carefully in places where shadows danced and secrets whispered in the dark. On a crisp Halloween night, my group of friends and I set out to prove our courage by visiting the infamous Hollow Manor, a decrepit old house rumored to be haunted by the spirits of its former residents. We had all heard the chilling stories about the place, unexplained footsteps, eerie whispers, and the feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. Despite the warnings, we were determined to confront our darkest fears. As we approached the crumbling manor, the full moon cast an eerie glow on its weathered facade, adding to its foreboding aura. The once grand estate now stood as a shadow of its former self, with boarded-up windows and ivy-covered walls. Nervous excitement buzzed among us as we hesitated at the entrance. My heart pounded in my chest, but I couldn't back out now. We took a deep breath and crossed the threshold into the darkness within. The musty air filled our lungs as we cautiously made our way through the decaying rooms. The floorboards creaked beneath our feet, as if protesting our intrusion. The flickering candlelight from our flashlights cast eerie shadows on the walls, adding to the atmosphere of dread. As we explored further, strange occurrences began to unfold. Objects seemed to move on their own, and cold drafts brushed against our skin, even though the windows were sealed shut. Each room we entered held its own unsettling energy, leaving us feeling like unwanted guests in a home that was not meant for the living. I could see the fear in my friends' eyes, mirroring the unease that gnawed at my own soul. We pushed on, trying to reassure each other that it was all just our imagination playing tricks on us. But as the night wore on, the sense of dread intensified. A sudden gust of wind extinguished our flashlights, leaving us in pitch darkness. Panic set in as we fumbled to relight them, and for a moment, I felt like we were no longer alone. Voices echoed through the halls, their origin unknown. Whispers seemed to dance on the edge of our hearing, and I could swear I saw fleeting shadows darting in and out of the corners of my vision. We gathered in the grand ballroom, where an old piano stood ominously in the center. As we nervously joked about summoning spirits, an unsettling melody began to play from the piano keys, soft and haunting, as if played by an invisible hand. Terrified, we stumbled backward, but the melody seemed to follow us wherever we went. The more we tried to escape it, the louder and more aggressive it became, filling the air with a chilling sense of malevolence. In that moment, all our bravado melted away, and we knew we had to leave. But as we made our way to the exit, the house seemed to shift and change around us, the hallways twisting and distorting into a maze of darkness. Panic consumed us as we realized we were trapped, our every attempt to escape thwarted by an unseen force. It was as if the house itself was alive and feeding off our fear. With nowhere to run, we huddled together in the ballroom, our hearts pounding in unison. The haunting melody reached a crescendo, and the walls seemed to close in on us, suffocating and claustrophobic. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, the music abruptly stopped. The air around us cleared, and the darkness retreated. The house, once alive with malevolence, now stood silent and still. With trembling limbs, we cautiously made our way out of the manor, no longer daring to challenge its haunted secrets. The experience had forever changed us, leaving us with a newfound respect for the darkness that lurks in the shadows. As we emerged into the cool night air, the weight of our experience hung heavy on our shoulders. Halloween had transformed from a night of playful scares into an encounter with true terror, a reminder that some fears are best left unexplored. And as we looked back at the haunted manor, we couldn't help but wonder what other horrors lay hidden within its walls, waiting to ensnare those foolish enough to test their bravery. In the heart of a remote farming community, nestled amid rolling fields and ancient woods, lay the quaint village of Silverbrook. Every year, as Halloween night approached, the villagers prepared for a peculiar harvest festival that had been celebrated for generations. The autumnal breeze whispered through the trees, carrying with it a sense of anticipation and unease. The sky darkened as the sun set, casting eerie shadows across the land. I had heard whispers about this festival, but I had never witnessed it myself until that fateful night. As I made my way into the village square, I was met with a scene that seemed to come straight out of an old horror movie. The villagers, dressed in traditional attire, were gathered around a massive bonfire, its flames dancing in the wind. At the center of the square stood an ancient oak tree, its gnarled branches stretching towards the sky like skeletal fingers. The villagers formed a circle around the tree, holding hands as they chanted ancient incantations, their voices echoing in the darkness. My heart raced with a mixture of fear and curiosity. I had been warned about the strange customs of this festival, but I couldn't resist the allure of experiencing it firsthand. As the night wore on, the atmosphere grew more intense. The chants seemed to grow louder, vibrating through the very core of my being. Strange symbols were drawn on the ground with chalk, and offerings of fruits and vegetables were placed at the base of the oak tree. It was then that I noticed a change in the weather. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves of the surrounding trees, and the air became thick with an unnatural chill. It felt as if the very elements were responding to the ancient rituals being performed before me. As the villagers continued their chants, their fervor seemed to intensify. They swayed in unison, their eyes fixed on the tree as if expecting some mystical force to manifest before them. It was then that I realized how deeply rooted their beliefs were in this age-old tradition. Suddenly, the wind grew stronger, and the bonfire roared with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. The villagers' chants reached a fever pitch, and I could feel the ground beneath my feet tremble. In that moment, a wave of panic washed over me. It was as if some unseen force had been awakened, and I feared the consequences of meddling with forces beyond our understanding. But as the moments passed, nothing out of the ordinary happened. The wind eventually died down, and the bonfire returned to a calmer blaze. The villagers slowly dispersed, their celebrations coming to an end. I stayed for a while, pondering the events of the night. Perhaps it was my own fear and imagination that had created the sense of foreboding that had enveloped me. Maybe the ancient rituals were merely a cultural tradition, no different from the customs of any other community. As I walked back home under the moonlit sky, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, as if unseen eyes were following my every move. The normally familiar surroundings felt alien and ominous. Over the next few days, the village seemed to be plagued by an atmosphere of unease. Whispers of the festival's eerie occurrences spread like wildfire, and even the most rational villagers couldn't shake the feeling that something unnatural had been unleashed. But in time, the sense of fear and unease gradually subsided, and life in the village returned to normal. The peculiar harvest festival had come and gone, leaving behind only tales of its mystery and wonder. Looking back on that Halloween night, I realized that fear can be a powerful force, capable of distorting our perception and conjuring shadows where none truly exist. The festival had not awakened any malevolent entity, it had merely awakened the darkest corners of our minds. And so, each Halloween, as the villagers of Silverbrook gather once more to celebrate their ancient harvest festival, they do so with a mix of fear and reverence, knowing that the true terror lies not in the rituals themselves, but in the depths of their own imagination. It was Halloween night in the small town of Sleepy Hollow, a place steeped in eerie folklore and ghostly legends. Among the tales that haunted the minds of its residents was that of the infamous Headless Horseman, a spectral figure said to ride through the woods at night, searching for his lost head. For years, the legend had captivated the imaginations of the town's youth, and every Halloween, a group of brave teenagers would venture into the dark woods to test the authenticity of the tale. They sought the thrill of confronting their fears head-on, dismissing the legend as mere superstition. Among this year's group were Amy, a fearless and spirited young woman, Jake, the jokester of the group, Emma, the level-headed skeptic, and Mark, the quiet and contemplative one. Together, they embarked on their quest to uncover the truth behind the legend of the Headless Horseman. As the moon cast an eerie glow over the forest, the group ventured deeper into the woods, their flashlights illuminating the twisted branches and gnarled roots that seemed to reach out for them. The air was thick with anticipation, and the sound of rustling leaves echoed ominously through the night. Amy led the way, determined to show no sign of fear despite the unsettling atmosphere. Jake cracked jokes to ease the tension, but even he couldn't completely hide his unease. Emma, ever the rational one, tried to calm her friends' nerves, reassuring them that there was no truth to the legend. After what felt like an eternity, the group arrived at a clearing, surrounded by ancient trees and an air of hushed mystery. They gathered around a large, weathered tombstone, rumored to be the final resting place of the Headless Horseman. Legend says that if we say his name 3 times, he will appear, Mark said, his voice barely above a whisper. Are you serious? Jake scoffed, trying to mask his fear with humor. This is just an old tale, right? Amy glanced at Emma, her expression revealing a hint of doubt. We came all this way. Let's just do it and prove there's nothing to be afraid of. Fine, Emma sighed, trying to hide her own reservations. But remember, it's just a story. Taking a deep breath, the group chanted the name of the Headless Horseman 3 times. For a moment, nothing happened, and they chuckled nervously. But as they were about to dismiss the legend as a myth, they heard a distant sound, hooves pounding on the ground. The forest suddenly seemed to come alive with haunting echoes, and the group exchanged fearful glances. Amy's bravado wavered, and she grabbed onto Jake's arm for support. Is that a horse? Mark whispered, his eyes wide with terror. The pounding hooves grew louder, closer, and the group's fear escalated. But before they could run, they saw it, a shadowy figure on horseback, charging towards them. Fear gripped them like a vice as they turned and fled, their hearts pounding in their chests. Branches scratched at their faces and thorns tore at their clothes as they sprinted through the dark woods, desperate to escape the spectral rider. But as they reached the edge of the woods, the sound of hooves faded, and the figure vanished into the night. Gasping for breath, they stopped to catch their breath, realizing that the legend had taken hold of their minds, making them believe in the existence of the Headless Horseman. Amy's bravado had crumbled, and she clung to her friends, shaking with fear. Jake, the jokester, was pale and trembling. Emma's skepticism had been shattered, and Mark remained silent, still trying to comprehend the unexplainable. We saw him, right? He was real. Amy finally spoke, her voice quivering. I don't know what we saw, Emma replied, her voice shaking as well. But let's get out of here. This place gives me the creeps. Without another word, the group made their way back to town, haunted by the night's chilling events. They had entered the woods as skeptics, but they emerged with a newfound fear of the legend they had once dismissed. As the years passed, the tale of that Halloween night became a cautionary tale in Sleepy Hollow. The group of friends never ventured into the woods again, and the legend of the Headless Horseman continued to haunt the town's imagination. But the truth of that night remains shrouded in mystery. Was it a trick of the mind, or had they truly encountered something supernatural? One thing was certain, the legend of the Headless Horseman would forever be etched in their memories, a chilling reminder that some legends are better left untested, especially on Halloween night. On Halloween night, the moon hung high in the darkened sky, casting an eerie glow over our group of friends as we stood outside the dilapidated house on the outskirts of town. The old witch's residence was a legendary source of spooky tales, and we were determined to experience some thrills and chills of our own. Are you sure about this, guys? Emily asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and excitement. Don't be such a scaredy cat, Em. It's all just stories, Jake replied, trying to sound brave. Despite our bravado, we couldn't deny the unsettling atmosphere that surrounded the house. The air felt heavy with ancient magic, and the overgrown garden seemed to claw at the edges of the property. I heard that if you break something inside, You'll be cursed, Mia said, a shiver running down her spine. Oh, come on, it's all just folklore, Eric chimed in, trying to ease the tension. We cautiously approached the house, the creaking floorboards and rustling leaves adding to our unease. The door was slightly ajar, inviting us to step inside. With a shared glance of nervous determination, we crossed the threshold into the dimly lit interior. The house was filled with an array of peculiar items, potion bottles, ancient books, and curious artifacts. We couldn't resist the temptation to explore and began to wander deeper into the witch's domain. As we made our way through the shadowy rooms, we came across a peculiar-looking urn sitting on a dusty shelf. Emily picked it up curiously, and before any of us could warn her, the urn slipped from her grasp and shattered on the floor. Oh no! We should leave now, Mia urged, fear evident in her voice. But it was too late. The moment the urn broke, a cold gust of wind swept through the room, extinguishing the candles that lit our path. The house seemed to come alive, its walls groaning and its shadows dancing. What have you done? Jake exclaimed, his face pale with terror. Before we could react, the floor beneath us shook violently, and the house began to change. Walls moved, and doors shifted, trapping us in a maze of darkness. Panic set in, and we ran aimlessly, desperately searching for a way out. As we stumbled through the ever-changing corridors, we heard eerie whispers in our ears, taunting us and mocking our fear. It felt as though the house itself was alive, tormenting us for our curiosity. We need to find a way to break the curse, Eric said, trying to stay composed. But how? We don't even know what we broke, Mia exclaimed, her voice trembling. In our frantic search for a solution, we stumbled upon an ancient book that detailed the legend of the witch who once lived in the house. According to the book, the urn contained the ashes of her most powerful spell, a curse designed to torment those who dared to disturb her resting place. The only way to break the curse is to reverse the spell, Emily read aloud, her voice shaky. But how do we do that? I asked, feeling a sense of dread creeping over me. The book spoke of a spell that could reverse the curse, but it required a rare and powerful ingredient, the heart of a black rose, said to be hidden deep within the witch's garden. With no other choice, we ventured back into the ever-changing house, searching for a way to escape the curse. The whispers grew louder, and shadows seemed to reach out for us as we navigated the treacherous corridors. Finally, we stumbled upon a hidden passage that led to the overgrown garden. The air was heavy with an otherworldly presence, and the plants seemed to twist and contort in unnatural ways. As we searched for the black rose, the house itself seemed to fight back. The walls closed in on us, and the garden became a labyrinth of thorns and darkness. Yet, we pressed on, fueled by the hope of breaking the curse. After what felt like an eternity, we found the black rose, its petals as dark as the night itself. With shaking hands, Emily performed the spell from the book, using the rose as the final ingredient. The moment the spell was complete, the house trembled one last time, and the curse was broken. The walls stopped shifting, and the shadows retreated. We found ourselves standing outside the house, safe and free from its malevolent grip. As we made our way home, we couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and awe at the night's terrifying events. We had learned the hard way that some legends are best left undisturbed, and that the line between reality and the supernatural can sometimes blur on Halloween night. But we also discovered the strength of friendship and the power of facing our fears together, emerging stronger and wiser from our night of cursed shadows. Halloween night had arrived, and the air was filled with an electric buzz of excitement and anticipation. Costumed kids roamed the neighborhood, going from house to collect their sweet treats. As I joined the festive atmosphere, I could hardly contain my excitement. My neighbors had always been known for their eccentricity, and this year's Halloween gift was no exception. To my surprise, I received a peculiar dollhouse as a present. It was unlike any dollhouse I had seen before, with intricate details and an eerie aura that sent shivers down my spine. The dollhouse was a replica of an old Victorian mansion, complete with tiny dolls and furniture. The dolls' glassy eyes seemed to follow me wherever I moved, and their painted smiles appeared strangely sinister. As night descended, the dollhouse's presence became increasingly unsettling. I placed it on a shelf in my room, but its eeriness seemed to permeate the entire space. With the lights off, I could almost swear I heard faint whispers and giggles coming from the miniature house. At first, I dismissed it as my imagination running wild, but as the night wore on, the noises grew louder and more distinct. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and I felt a growing sense of unease. Desperate for an explanation, I decided to investigate the dollhouse. With trembling hands, I turned on my flashlight and shone it inside. The dolls appeared innocent enough, frozen in their places, but there was something about their expressions that didn't sit right with me. Suddenly, one of the dolls moved. It was just a slight twitch, but it was enough to send me stumbling back in terror. I must be imagining things, I thought, trying to convince myself that it was a mere trick of the light. As I continued to watch, more dolls seemed to shift slightly, as if they were alive. Their once static faces now showed subtle changes in expression, and the whispers grew louder, filling the room with an eerie chorus. The dollhouse became a source of fascination and dread for me. Every night, as the clock struck midnight, I would hear the soft pitter-patter of tiny footsteps and the sound of furniture being rearranged within its walls. One night, I mustered the courage to confront the strange occurrences head-on. Armed with my flashlight, I ventured closer to the dollhouse. The doll's eyes seemed to glint with an otherworldly light, and I felt an inexplicable pull, as if the dollhouse were beckoning me to come closer. With trembling hands, I touched the front door of the miniature mansion, and to my horror, it swung open. Inside, the room was eerily similar to my own, with a bed, a desk, and even a tiny replica of myself. My breath hitched in my throat, and I could hardly believe my eyes. The dolls were now positioned to mimic the scene in my bedroom, as if they were mirroring my every move. In a panic, I slammed the dollhouse shut and backed away. What was this sinister plaything? Had it somehow tapped into my world, observing and imitating me in the darkness? Fear and curiosity waged war within me. The dollhouse became both a source of dread and a puzzle I was determined to solve. As Halloween night approached again, I made a fateful decision. I couldn't let this malevolent dollhouse continue to terrorize me and potentially others. Armed with a plan, I placed the dollhouse inside a box and headed towards the outskirts of town. The old oak tree in the woods seemed like the perfect spot to bury the dollhouse deep within the earth, sealing its haunting secrets forever. I dug a hole and buried the box, hoping to sever its connection to my world. But as I turned to leave, a cold breeze washed over me, and I heard the faint sound of whispers once more. Panic surged through me as I realized that the dollhouse's malevolence might never truly be contained. As I ran back towards the safety of my home, the Halloween night felt darker and more ominous than ever before. The dollhouse's presence still lingered in my mind, a chilling reminder that some things are better left untouched, even on the spookiest night of the year. Moving into a new house is always an exciting adventure, and for my family, it was no different. Our new home was an old Victorian-style house with a rich history and a mysterious allure. However, there was one peculiar detail that caught our attention: a locked room in the attic. As Halloween approached, the atmosphere in the house seemed to shift, becoming tinged with a sense of foreboding. The kids were excited about the prospect of trick-or-treating, and my wife and I decided to make it an adventurous night by exploring the locked room in the attic. Little did we know that our decision would unearth dark secrets that were meant to stay hidden. As the sun set on Halloween night, casting eerie shadows across the house, we gathered around the attic door. My heart pounded in anticipation as I inserted the key into the rusty lock. With a click, the door creaked open, and a cold gust of air swept down from the attic, sending shivers down our spines. Taking a deep breath, I climbed up the rickety ladder, followed closely by my wife and kids. As we reached the top, the dim glow of flashlights revealed a space that seemed frozen in time. The attic was dark, its walls lined with dusty, weathered boxes and old furniture draped with cobwebs. A musty odor hung in the air, and a sense of unease settled over us. My wife gasped as she spotted a large chest in the corner, its lid slightly ajar. We approached it cautiously, curiosity outweighing our trepidation. Inside the chest, we found a collection of old books and torn pages, like fragments of an ancient journal. The handwriting was barely legible, but as we pieced together the sentences, a dark narrative began to unfold. The journal belonged to a previous owner, a man named Samuel. He had been a recluse, dabbling in esoteric practices and the occult. His disturbing entries spoke of rituals and sacrifices conducted in the house, promising power and wealth in exchange for unthinkable acts. As we read on, the words seemed to seep into our minds, filling us with a growing sense of dread. My wife suggested we stop reading, but something compelled us to continue, as if we were drawn into Samuel's twisted world. Among the torn pages, we found sketches of grotesque figures and symbols, some of which we recognized from stories of ancient rituals. The attic felt charged with an unsettling energy, and we knew we had stumbled upon something far beyond our understanding. In a corner of the attic, we discovered a peculiar-looking idol. Its dark eyes seemed to follow us as we moved, and an aura of malevolence emanated from it. My youngest child reached out to touch it, and as soon as their fingers brushed its surface, a sudden gust of wind swept through the attic, extinguishing our flashlights. In the darkness, we heard strange whispers and echoing footsteps, as if we were no longer alone in the attic. Panic took hold, and we fumbled to relight our flashlights. When the beams finally pierced the darkness, we saw nothing but empty space around us. With trembling hands, we decided it was time to leave the attic, leaving the chest and its sinister contents behind. As we descended the ladder, a deep sense of relief washed over us, but the lingering fear remained. The events of that Halloween night left an indelible mark on our family. We couldn't shake the feeling that we had awoken something dark and malevolent in that attic, something that should have remained hidden. Over the years, we tried to forget that night, but the secrets of the attic haunted our dreams. We eventually sealed off the room, hoping to keep the malevolence contained. But every Halloween, as the night settled in, a sense of unease would return, a reminder of the darkness we had stumbled upon. Some secrets are best left undisturbed, especially on Halloween, when the boundary between the living and the unknown becomes dangerously thin. On Halloween night, the crisp autumn air was alive with excitement and anticipation. As a mischievous teenager with a penchant for pranks, I couldn't resist the opportunity to scare some unsuspecting trick-or-treaters. With a ghostly costume and a mischievous grin, I set out to give my friends a night they wouldn't forget. Dressed in a tattered white sheet and with eerie blue makeup on my face, I looked every bit the part of a ghost. Armed with a hollowed-out pumpkin full of candy, I roamed the neighborhood, ready to make my grand entrance. As I approached the first house on my list, I couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement and nervousness. This was going to be the best prank of the night, and I was determined to make it memorable. With a deep breath, I knocked on the door, and a shiver ran down my spine as I heard the creaking sound from inside the house. My heart pounded in my chest, and I fought to maintain my composure. The door slowly swung open, revealing a dimly lit hallway. I expected to hear the joyful cries of trick-or-treaters, but there was nothing but silence. My anticipation grew, and I was ready to make my ghostly appearance. As I stepped forward, my eyes caught something that sent a chill down my spine. A sinister-looking symbol was smeared in red on the doorframe, a blood mark. My heart skipped a beat, and a voice inside me urged me to turn back. But curiosity got the better of me, and I hesitantly pushed the door open. The interior was dark and gloomy, with a musty smell hanging in the air. The silence was oppressive, and I felt like an intruder in this eerie abode. Holding back my nerves, I took a few steps inside, calling out to see if anyone was there. But my voice echoed through the empty halls, unanswered. My heart pounded louder with each passing moment, and I decided that I had played my prank long enough. I turned to leave, but as I reached for the doorknob, the door slammed shut with a deafening thud, trapping me inside. Fear took hold, and I frantically tried to open the door, but it was as if an unseen force was holding it shut. Panic washed over me, and I felt like a mouse caught in a predator's trap. Just as I was about to lose all hope, a faint voice echoed from the shadows. "Who dares to trespass in my domain?" it said, sending a shiver down my spine. With trembling hands, I turned towards the voice, but I could see no one. The darkness seemed to have a life of its own, swirling and shifting around me. "I am sorry. I didn't mean to intrude," I stammered, hoping to appease whatever unseen presence lurked within the house. But there was no response, only the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps drawing closer. I mustered all my courage and bolted towards the nearest window, hoping to escape this nightmare. But just as I reached it, a cold gust of wind extinguished the candlelight in the room, plunging me into complete darkness. Panic and terror consumed me as I fumbled blindly for the window latch. The footsteps grew louder, and I could feel a chilling presence just inches away from me. With one final desperate effort, I managed to open the window and climbed out into the cold night air. I ran as fast as my legs could carry me, not daring to look back. As I finally reached the safety of my friend's house, I collapsed on the porch, my heart pounding in my chest. They found me in a state of shock and terror, struggling to comprehend what had just happened. I tried to explain, but the words seemed inadequate to describe the horrors I had encountered in that house. All I knew was that I would never forget the blood mark on that door, a haunting symbol of the night that my Halloween prank went horribly wrong. On Halloween night, a group of us, adventurous and seeking thrills, decided to join a haunted hayride in a nearby town known for its eerie attractions. The excitement was palpable as we huddled together, waiting for the hay wagon to arrive. As the wagon pulled up, we were greeted by a creepy-looking guide dressed in tattered clothes and wearing a sinister grin. He beckoned us to climb aboard, promising us a night we would never forget. As we settled into the hay, the wagon jolted to life, and we began our journey into the darkness. The moon hung high in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the surrounding woods. The atmosphere was filled with excitement and a hint of nervousness as we didn't know what to expect. The ride started innocently enough, with spooky sound effects and animatronic creatures popping out from behind trees. We laughed nervously, finding solace in the knowledge that it was all just a well-executed show. But as the ride continued, the scares grew more intense, and the line between reality and illusion began to blur. The hay wagon ventured deeper into the woods, where the darkness seemed to swallow us whole. We passed by an old, abandoned asylum, its broken windows and crumbling walls hauntingly illuminated by a flickering light. Our guide warned us of the building's sinister history, a place once filled with unspeakable horrors and madness. Goosebumps formed on my arms as we moved on. Next, we approached a haunted house, its facade worn and weathered, a stark contrast to the gory decorations that adorned it. The air around us felt heavy, as if something malevolent was lurking within those decaying walls. A feeling of unease settled over the group, and we clung to each other, seeking comfort in our shared fear. The guide's voice became more ominous, his stories more unsettling. It was as if he knew more than he was letting on, and his eerie performance only added to the terror. The hayride then took us through a desolate cemetery, where tombstones stood tall like eerie sentinels in the moonlight. The guide spoke of restless spirits and the dark secrets buried beneath the soil. My heart pounded in my chest as I wondered if we were truly alone in this graveyard. As the night wore on, the hayride became increasingly eerie. Strange sounds echoed through the woods, and unsettling figures appeared at the edge of our vision, only to vanish when we turned to look. The tension in the air was palpable, and the line between reality and the fabricated scares blurred even further. We began to question what was real and what was part of the show. At one point, the guide stopped the wagon near a decrepit shack hidden deep in the woods. He warned us not to leave the wagon, but a few of our more daring friends couldn't resist the temptation to explore. Against our protests, they hopped off the wagon and disappeared into the darkness. We waited nervously, expecting them to reappear any moment. But minutes passed, and they didn't return. Fear gnawed at us, and we pleaded with the guide to go after them. Reluctantly, he agreed, and we ventured into the darkness to search for our missing friends. The woods felt alive with malevolence as we navigated the shadows, calling out their names. We stumbled upon the abandoned shack, and to our horror, we found our friends huddled inside, trembling with fear. They told us of strange encounters in the woods, of ghostly apparitions and whispered voices that seemed to follow them. The guide insisted that it was all part of the show, but we knew better. As we returned to the hay wagon, a feeling of dread hung over us. We had unknowingly stepped into something far more sinister than we had signed up for. The guide's eerie smile and cryptic warnings haunted our thoughts, and we couldn't help but wonder if there was more to this haunted hayride than met the eye. As the wagon finally brought us back to the starting point, we were relieved to be back in the familiar surroundings of the town. But the memory of that night's terror would linger in our minds, reminding us that on Halloween, the line between reality and horror is a thin one, and sometimes, the scariest things are the ones that are all too real. It was the night of the most anticipated Halloween event of the year, a glamorous masquerade ball held in a grand old mansion on the outskirts of New Orleans. The sprawling estate was a perfect setting for the occasion, with its sprawling gardens and ornate architecture that seemed to have been plucked from a Gothic novel. I had been lucky enough to secure an invitation, and as I stood before my mirror adjusting my black tuxedo, I couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and apprehension. The theme of the night was masks, and not just any masks, elaborate, intricately designed pieces of art that concealed the faces of the guests. I had chosen a Venetian-style mask, decorated with silver and black feathers, which I thought added an air of mystery to my ensemble. With a final glance in the mirror, I grabbed my invitation and headed out into the cool, autumn night. The mansion was a sight to behold as I approached, bathed in an eerie, flickering light that emanated from countless jack-o'-lanterns lining the grand staircase. The chatter of guests filled the air as I made my way inside, and I was immediately struck by the extravagance of the event. People in all manner of costumes mingled, their masks giving them an otherworldly appearance. I joined the festivities, sipping cocktails and engaging in polite conversation with fellow guests. As the night wore on, the atmosphere grew more electric, the music more seductive, and the masks more intricate. I couldn't help but be drawn into the enchanting allure of the event. Then, I noticed her. Across the ballroom, a woman stood alone, her mask a shimmering silver creation adorned with sapphire jewels. Her presence was magnetic, and I found myself making my way toward her. As I approached, I couldn't help but marvel at the beauty of her mask and the way it accentuated her eyes, which seemed to sparkle with an almost ethereal light. "May I have this dance?" I asked, extending my hand. She smiled beneath her mask and accepted, and together we glided onto the dance floor. The world around us seemed to fade away as we danced, and I was utterly captivated. It was as if we were the only two people in the room. As the night continued, I found myself spending more and more time with her. We talked about our lives, our dreams, and our fears, and the connection between us grew stronger with each passing moment. But as I looked around, I began to notice something unsettling. Other guests seemed to be watching us, their masked faces filled with a strange mixture of curiosity and malevolence. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but something was amiss. It was as if there were undercurrents of secrecy and darkness beneath the surface of this glamorous facade. The woman I had been dancing with, too, began to act strangely. Her once charming demeanor gave way to a more sinister air. Her laughter had an eerie quality, and her eyes no longer sparkled with warmth but rather with something colder, something predatory. I excused myself and retreated to a quieter corner of the mansion, my mind racing. It was then that I noticed something that sent a shiver down my spine. On a nearby table, a pile of masks lay discarded, each one more malevolent than the last. It was as if the masks themselves held some dark power, one that had been unleashed upon this unsuspecting gathering. As I watched in horror, the guests who had been watching us earlier began to converge on the woman I had danced with. The air was thick with tension as they encircled her, their masked faces contorted with malice. I knew I had to act, but I was paralyzed with fear. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the room plunged into darkness. Chaos erupted as panicked guests stumbled over one another in the blackness. When the lights came back on, the woman and her sinister entourage had vanished. The masquerade ball had descended into madness, and I knew I had to escape. I quickly made my way to the exit, my heart pounding in my chest. As I stepped out into the crisp night air, I couldn't help but wonder what had truly transpired in that mansion. The masks had concealed more than just identities, They had hidden the darkness that lurked within the hearts of those who wore them. It was a Halloween night I would never forget, a night that had shown me the true, chilling power of masks and the secrets they could hide.